And then I just went really hard with soccer cards. And I really started when the boom was happening. So I got in everything. By the time I had bought it and it hit my house, it was like triple or double in value. Like, it was insane. And I was talking to Jason, explaining to him, and I showed him, right, bought this for a tenner. It's 200 quid now. Don't even ask me how. And it's out the door. I was just moving it.
Unique Live is the latest soccer card collection from Futera. Each week we'll release brand new cards via the website. Now, over the years, our soccer cards have been crafted with 24 karat gold, silver, porcelain, crystal, and even diamond. But we don't just love a bit of bling here at Futera. No, we're passionate about creating beautifully rare soccer cards. You know, the kind of cards that you want to add to your collection so much that you contemplate selling your own dog to buy one. Sorry, Rover. With limited edition, officially licensed high-end cards available for some of the world's biggest clubs, you can be sure to find huge names in world football appearing on these cards week after week. So if you're new to sports cards, or you're already a big collector, or you're just looking to buy a present for the football fan in your life, well, this is for you. Now share this video with everybody you've ever met and head over to the website to buy yours now. We'll see you there soon.
Futera presents Soccer Cards and Chill.
Hello there, welcome back to Soccer Cards and Chill. This is a podcast dedicated to the beautiful hobby of collecting soccer cards and the beautiful game of football or slash soccer, depending on where you are in the world. We are Futera. We're a publisher of soccer cards and sports cards and collectibles, and we have been since 1989. This podcast is perfect for you if you're new to the hobby of soccer cards, or if you're a veteran collector and you've collected cards forever, because what we do in this podcast is every week we speak to a different person from within the hobby or outside the hobby sometimes about the hobby, and we try and provide as much insight as we can. You'll notice that the man in front of me is Mr. Mark Watson. He is the creative director here at Futera. Mark, do you want to know who we've got on the podcast today?
I do, but first, I think I should say AOL and Partington as tradition. Mate, do you practice that in the mirror every week, just to hone the whole start of the podcast there? You start. No. It's almost there, mate. Though you're like, it's getting good, and it's almost exactly the same every week. So I'm getting more and more impressed by this.
I've been watching a lot of our friend Jack, mate. He is a true professional, so I've been taking tips from him actually. So it shows that they're rubbing off. On the podcast today, we've got the lads from Soccer Card United. Great conversation. Had to cut it slightly shorter than I would have liked, though, Mark, because I'm a cheapskate and haven't paid for the professional version of Zoom, so we only had 40 minutes. But it was still a great chat. I love those guys. Jason and Enzo are top lads. They really are. I've been on their podcast. They were the first people to invite me on when I came into the job. So we've got that conversation coming up shortly. However, I know that many of you will just be looking forward to that conversation starting, and that'll be why you're listening. But before I talk to Soccer Card United, Mark, do you want to tell us about a new initiative here at Futera?
Are we talking about 50 ads?
We are.
Oh, there we go. Well, I'll begin. World Football Unique 50 is sort of my baby ads. Like it's, okay. We've curated, either one works, a checklist of players that, for me, are the greatest players in history, but also always have interesting stories, etc. So it's not just going to be your Pele's, Maradona's, like what you'd expect normally, but there's going to be people like Palino, Alcantara, etc. in the checklist as well. Some of the greats, maybe Dennis Law, etc. will be in there. Maybe not always the same as you'd expect for a top 50 players in history, but much more my favorite top 50 players in history, and sort of like historically from the 1940s all the way up to maybe the 1990s, with a definite nod towards 70s and 80s football, I would say. It's just a collection I've wanted to put out for a little while, ever since I talked about the mythicals, the virtual mythicals that we put out a few years back, and I said how much I love that, and it's just sort of born from that more than anything else. It's called 50 because there's 50 players on 50 cards released over 50 weeks. They're gold-plated cards. So 24 karat gold plated cards, mythicals, I believe they're mythicals. And yeah, just beautiful cards, and all players that sort of have a little bit of a that I like reading about, and I like the stories behind, etc. So it was a really nice collection to put together. I think we kick it off. Do we kick it off this week, Ads? It might be the week after. We'll confirm that on the thing. But Di Stefano, we kick it off with. Did I just tell everybody who was on the first card? I think I did. So we'll kick it off with Di Stefano, and then every week there's just there's more and more treats coming. I think it's of 7, and then there's a parallel in there as well, so 1 of 1. Just like obviously with there's a trend in vintage cards. There's an interest around about footballers from sort of 40s, 50s, 60s, probably coinciding with trading cards at the moment. So 50 just became like a bit of a natural thing that we want to do. And once series 1 of 50 goes through, I'm already looking at the checklist for the next series of 50, which would be like, probably you'd hear it here first, but cult players. That will be the next one. So series 1 is my favorite players. Series 2 is cult players, people that you may not know of, but have got an amazing backstory. One being Robin Friday, who I think that sort of they call him like the greatest player that never was. Like, have a little look. I think Oasis, the English band, or at least 1 or 2 of the members of Oasis have actually backed a Hollywood film about him. And he was just this player that was supposed to be phenomenal. And he retired, I think, when he was 26. He sadly died when he was 38, I think. And he just played, I think he played for Reading, possibly Cardiff as well. And he was just supposed to be a magician, like in the sort of form of like George Best, Rodney Marsh, etc. But like people who watched him questioned that he was maybe better. And his career just sort of went, his career just went in a different direction, which is probably the right way of saying it. I don't think I think he took more to the other side of fame than he did to the footballing side. So sort of career spiraled a bit out of control from what I understand. And maybe the talent that he had never really shone through as much as it should have. But I know there's a film in the offing, if it might have even come out by now. And so it's players like that, players that maybe you've never heard of that would go into series 2. But as I said, that's not the one we're bringing out yet. That's already in the pipeline. But the first series of 50 is sort of my favorite 50 players ever. And there's some sort of wild cards in there a little bit. And obviously there's the favorites as well. I'm not a massive fan of like football from 2000 onwards. So like 60s, 40s, 50s, but then 60s, 70s, 80s. I love football from that era. That's sort of, it's not my era. Like I don't use amazing skin cream and I'm 60 years old, but just it is like it's the bit that I'm passionate about, I suppose. So yeah, no, it's a really exciting one that we've put out, and I'm looking forward to it. The reason why we announced it a little while back and we haven't actually launched it is because I think we said this on the live show on Wednesday. We're still trying to work out we want to look at different ways of selling cards, like whether it be in raffles, whether it be in drops. And so we're looking at different ways that we can launch this. Either it will at the moment either be a drop, the same as we do Unique Live on Wednesday, or it could be in a weekly raffle, and people just put their name down for which ones they're interested in. And then we sort of, we almost pick it out of a hat, well, using whatever newfangled digital system that you've found for us, Ads, that I hear is in the offing. So that's,
there's a couple of options. I think we need to sit down, obviously, between now and Wednesday or the Wednesday after, whenever we decide to run with this and nail that, and we will do. But I've got my ear quite close to the ground with what the guys are saying to me. That's why I do them Instagram live things. It's why I'm so active on socials, because I'm always hearing and reading actually more so than hearing, unless someone comes on the actual Instagram live and says something to me, which happens, or the feedback we get at the end of the podcast. So at the end of this podcast, if I remember correctly, I asked the guys what they'd be doing in my situation. I did, because Enzo actually mentioned digital cards to me, which is another thing that we've got ongoing at the moment. So it all sounds good. So just to get that straight, then it's just the one card each week, but 7 of
one card each week. Yeah, I think it's of 7 plus a 1 of 1. One card each week released. So 50 cards, 50 players over 50 weeks, which is exciting. Yeah. It's just one last thing as well before we go into into your interview, is also with live, we're looking at Second Chance Sunday. Have we decided it's Sunday? Yeah.
Well, like you sound like you have. You mentioned this to me again yesterday, and
I like the name. I think it's catchy. So Second Chance Sunday will be a chance for anybody that missed out on the big cards throughout live. What happens is each week, like we have rules about like you can only buy one, etc. Sometimes people try and buy two or maybe three even. Sometimes we can't. People ask for refunds. Sometimes we can't get cards out to people in certain areas of the world because there's restrictions. And so those cards go back into the system, and we're going to be putting those into Second Chance Sunday, which is going to be in some kind of raffle system. So basically anybody that's interested in that can put their name down, and they'll be in a raffle system for cards. And there are some huge cards still going to be available. We'll put out a list at some point in the very near future, but it's there are some massive cards still available, especially certain mythicals that are sold out, but one or two might end up back onto the system. So that'll be exciting. So brilliant, mate. It's been it's been a good week on cards, and live was really fun. Yesterday was Abby Simons, etc., or 2 days ago, depending on when this goes out. Brilliant, mate. And looking forward now to Soccer Cards United's interview.
Yeah, so as I said, Soccer Cards United have been, I think they've been active vocally now for about a year. I think they've done their podcast, and it is a really good listen. They're two great lads. I've got a lot of time for them both. They are great characters as well, and they're a good endorsement of the hobby, I think. And they've been very supportive to me, and I've been able to kind of like lend an ear with them. They've been able to lend me their ear in terms of me asking them questions. So especially Jay. So yeah, it's been it was a good conversation. So we'll hit the play button now, and thanks for listening to Soccer Cards and Chill.
Perfect.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Soccer Cards and Chill podcast. I'm joined by Jason and Enzo from Soccer Cards United. Lads, I'm having to think about what I'm saying a lot here, because there's a danger of me calling this podcast Soccer Cards United and yours Soccer Cards and Chill, because it's just the mention of soccer cards altogether, and none of us are even American, and we're using the term. So
I know we've bought in completely.
we have. Well, it's lovely to see you both. Anyway,
you too.
Welcome to the podcast. I was saying just before we kicked off, this is the first one I've done where I'm speaking to two people at once, so that's cool, isn't it? And I think, Enzo, you're the first ever Irish Italian person that I've had on the podcast, and Jace, you're the first ever Irishman that I've had on the podcast.
Full on, I'm full blooded, and then Enzo is representing
the
whole span across Europe.
Yeah. So that's nice, isn't it? So that's nice. That there's a little accolade for you both there. So let's start off, because I think, boys, that a lot of people listening to this are going to know who you are already, because you're quite active.
Oh, stop.
You're quite active in the space, aren't you? So anybody who is aware of soccer cards already, they'll probably know who you are. But for those people who tune in, who are trying to discover a little bit more about the hobby, and who maybe haven't been exposed to you, Jace, do you just want to tell us a little bit first about kind of like what you're doing over there, and then we'll get Enzo's perspective after, shall we?
So about, I don't know how long it's been, 10 months, 9 months, something like that. Middle of last year, Enzo came to me and started telling me all about his new hobby of soccer card collecting / investing. And initially I was very resistant, but we have previously had a podcast together before, which is about a niche Italian football team. And so he was telling me about it, and we had these kind of hour-long conversations a few times where he was explaining various parts of me. And I said to him at one point, Enzo, we're doing a podcast right now. We're just not recording it, but this is essentially a soccer card podcast where you're teaching me all about soccer cards. And then we said, we could actually just make that podcast. And so we started making it. And the initial premise of the show was that I was kind of coming at it as the football fan, and Enzo was coming at it from the soccer card side of it. And he was inducting me into the hobby. And then I very quickly realized that even though I was in the middle of last year, I was still quite experienced quite quickly, because there's so many new people adding in all the time. And then we just started doing a weekly show about various topics. And then we added in a Q&A show as well. So we do 2 podcasts a week, audio only at the moment, wherever people can listen to podcasts.
Okay, so there's a couple of things to unpack there. First of all, What's this niche Italian team that you do a podcast for?
It's called the podcast is called the Frosinone, which is a pun on the name of the football team, who are called Frosinone. And they're from a little town just outside Rome, which is where Enzo's Italian family are from. So it's Enzo's ancestral football team. Yeah.
Yeah. So when myself and Jason met on the first day of college when we started, it was the first year Frosinone had been promoted to the top flight. So I was telling anyone that cared, and nobody cared, but I was just telling everyone because obviously it was a big deal. And then Jason just heard about it enough, and we were able to go to the pub and watch a game because they were in Serie A when they played Juventus and stuff, and it was on. And he just kind of became hooked through spending time with me. I couldn't not talk about them. I don't know how the podcast came about. That was more Jason. I think honestly, it came from the pun. Jason thought of the pun, and then Jason ran away with it.
How did they get on? Because what year was this? Because I vaguely remember I don't know.
15, 16.
And did they really struggle as to be expected?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was very disappointing.
Did they get a big win away somewhere? I feel like
yes.
Right. Where was that?
They got a big.
Yeah.
I was just saying the very first point we got was a last-minute draw at the Juventus Stadium, which was huge. Jason, what win are you thinking of?
Did we not beat Milan as well? No.
No, I think controversially Milan got a penalty or maybe 2 penalties in the last few minutes, and I'm still not over it. So let's not get into it.
Oh, but I dreamt that we beat Milan. Anyway, we went back down to Serie A.
Yeah.
Okay, because I do
Serie B, back down to Serie B.
I do recall. Again, I'm not going to say it was flat out like this, but I do recall, a team like that being involved in Serie A, because I listened to the Guardian Football Weekly podcast quite a bit on the run and whatever, and I'm sure I remember them talking about that. But anyway, we digress. So Enzo, you're a veteran then, are you? You're the epitome of a veteran, because you it sounds like you were involved in the hobby before Jason was. And you were steering him.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, at this point, if you have more than 12 months under your belt, it feels like you're a veteran, to be honest. And with the amount of stuff you have to learn as you go, you definitely feel like you know a lot of stuff. No, I wouldn't. I'd say I'm relatively new as well. I definitely, through being in Italy back in the day as well, like Calciatore stickers, Panini, obviously running Italy over there, and if I'm allowed to mention other companies,
of course you are.
But like, yeah, I again, it's kind of the classic story everyone says. I was in it, but I wasn't collecting. I was just sticking in the sticker albums. The World Cup came around, was probably the biggest time, and then probably in the last, I would say for the last 24 months, I was looking at it without being too serious. And I would say in the last 12 months, because like Football Index was something that then caught my eye, where I was like half seeing what was happening in soccer cards, seeing Football Index, and I was like, oh no, this is like less hassle in terms of packaging and understanding everything. I was like, I can still invest in the young players. This is good. So I gave that a little bit of a try, and then I just kind of fell out of it. And then I just went really hard with soccer cards. And I really started when the boom was happening. So I eventually, I got in everything. By the time I had bought it and it hit my house, it was like triple or double in value. Like it was insane. And I was talking to Jason, explaining to him, and I showed him, right, bought this for a tenner. It's 200 quid now. Don't even ask me how. And it's out the door. I was just moving it. And obviously that was the spike. Jason hopped in just as it began to crash down.
Well, no, hang on a second. That's not strictly true, because it's not like I made the decision to come in as it peaked. You only brought me in when you were sure that I wasn't going to compete with you.
That's not true. There was a very small seller base in Europe. I had to clean up what I could.
He kept me out of the market long enough for him to clean up. Then he brought me in when there was no more bargains to be got, because he knew I would have gotten them.
That's sensible. That's sensible.
It's sensible,
though,
yeah. He's shrewd. He's a very shrewd businessman. That's why we're doing the podcast.
He sounds it. Sports Index, by the way, for those of you that aren't listening, Sports Index. That aren't listening. If you're listening, you're listening, or watching. Sports Index, for those of you who don't know, was what I meant to say then. Yeah, Football Index. Sorry. That's. I'm fascinated by this platform. I'm not on it, but is it any good? Is it something that have you made money from it?
I already did the trial. I did the trial period and then I dipped out, but I did understand it, but it looked like it had a great idea. Definitely a lot of flaws with it. Jason, you definitely dabbled more. You kind of got into it more.
Yeah, it's a football trading thing. It's basically like a monetized kind of fantasy game, with other stuff going on as well. And it's for a lot of people that would have recreational interests in the stock market. Some people with like genuine interests in stocks and commodities and stuff, who are also big into football. A lot of gamblers are into it. It's not exactly my cup of tea, but it's a big thing in the UK and Ireland, and they're expanding. But there's a whole other subculture about Football Index and sports trading elsewhere.
Yeah. So this whole because you're right, Jason. These type of things are quite big in our respective countries. They certainly are here in Britain, anyway. I've got a friend that works for Bet365, and this explosion in gambling on the football is certainly something that wasn't a thing when I was growing up. I mean, I remember people doing accumulators from about like 16 onwards, but now it's just like next level. What impact do you think, Jason? You answer this first, and then you give me your thoughts as well, Enzo. What impact do you think that this whole kind of the whole kind of like gambling aspect of culture now of following football is having on trading cards? So people buying or looking for rookies and then hoping that they go on, and they're placing a bet in a way, right? This rookie's going to do something. Is there anything there? Is there a synergy, do you think?
Oh, there definitely is. I mean, like I would say starting in America where sports, I mean, I think the laws are changing now in various states in America, but traditionally you could only bet on sports in a couple of places in America. So if you were into fantasy sports or you might have a fella operating a bookies at the back of a barber shop, but other than that, you couldn't really gamble in most places. So I fully think that one of the reasons why sports cards is so big in America is because there's, in a lot of places, for a lot of people, no other real way to gamble on the sports you like. So instead of, say, backing your team every week, you can buy the rookies and maybe flip the rookies. So that's definitely a substitute effect going on, or a surrogate for gambling in the States. And then when it comes to Europe, like so many top level in every country in Europe, so many top level football teams are sponsored by betting companies. People can bet on their phones all the time. They can do whatever they want. So the idea of making money off your football knowledge has been completely like liberalized and thrown out there. So now when someone says, hey, you can buy this based on your football knowledge, then you can sell it and you can make money, it's not really a leap at all. And a lot of people who have, especially because I know a lot of people have been burned by the increase in mobile gambling and stuff. A lot of people are saying, wait a second, so I can do something similar to what I was doing, spend money on football, use my football knowledge, but at the end of the day, I still have something. It's not just me giving money to a bookie. It's actually, I have these cards and I can hold on to them. And there's a whole aspect of, it's almost more wholesome or something. So I think it's something people are waiting for in many ways.
Yeah. Enzo, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's why you're seeing like Bet365 is a great example. Like even to watch Frosinone when they're in the second division, Bet365 streams it because that's how I'd watch second division Italian football. Like very well accustomed to that website. But then when you see them like a football index kind of popping up, that's like what like people like I think there's been such a huge explosion of online gambling, and a lot of which isn't ever really spoken about because you can do it on your phone. You could be a big gambler on football and no one actually ever know about it around you. And I think there's a huge culture that the gambling companies will have all the numbers, but I think the likes of us, we wouldn't. But there's a huge percentage of people spending a lot of money on gambling. And then we've seen that when Football Index pops up, which is like, I'm already spending €1,000 a month on gambling. Now I can just put it into this platform. And they're talking about it on Twitter a lot more than you would if you're just gambling flat out. It's different. It's a gaming element. It's fun. And then that links, like even a lot of our listeners are now recently Football Index people that have actually, because that platform went through kind of a struggle recently, and a lot of them have actually just looked for alternatives and they went for sports cards, and they actually came to us and they said, and we were like teaching them. That's where episode 17 of our one came out, which was like trying to an all you need to know if you know football and you have those characteristics already of looking for rookies, etc., explaining the nuances of cards. So it is completely connected, and I think it's a huge opportunity for like the sports card market to grow, because again, you're getting physical assets as well. You're not just putting it on one thing, and if it goes wrong, like Mbappe breaks his leg, wait 2 years and he could be back at his best, whereas with a bet, if you put it on, someone loses, the money's gone.
I remember Mitch saying to me, Mitch from LDN Cards, saying, I think with people trying to flip sports cards, soccer cards specifically, this he was talking about I think the context of the conversation was advice for new people coming into the hobby and trying to do that. And he was like, buy what you like, because if the bottom falls out tomorrow, then you've still got something that you like and that you want. And that's kind of resonated with me. If I obviously I'm not entering the space like that. I work for a manufacturer, but if I was, and I was like, okay, I want to try and get lucky on a couple of things, it makes sense to still get stuff that you're gonna like, because then if you're caught holding it, okay, cool. At least the analogy he used was sports cars. If that car doesn't actually end up being worth anything into the future, then at least you've got something that you like. If you like to drive.
Yeah.
So it's a similar kind of
100%.
analogy. I find that interesting. What do you lads, Enzo? What do you think of vintage at the moment? Like, I keep on seeing this being mentioned at the time of recording this. It's the 18th of Feb, and in this little period now, I keep on seeing vintage coming up a lot. People talking about vintage cards. What's your kind of thoughts on vintage? Is it something that you're into?
Yeah, I think it's similar to that. Buy what you like. I think there's two opinions I would have on vintage. Is that it is still, if you believe in the hobby and you believe where it's going, then right now with vintage, it's still a huge land grab because there's so much of it, and there's demand. Demand is always increasing, but there's still everything pretty much is underpriced. If it's like a GOAT, if it's like a team GOAT, a national GOAT, whatever the case may be. But at the same time, I think a lot of people have bought a lot of vintage that they don't really care about themselves at all. Like at all. Like players you've never seen play, which is obviously most of them, especially if you're young, you probably haven't, especially if it's real old vintage. But players that like you've never even seen a documentary, you never really hear about them. Like I'm seeing some names pop up. I'm like, I've never even heard about it. And then you probably won't get stung long term because there's always someone. Because the key with vintage is supply demand. The supply is very, very low. If you have good graded vintage, it's probably never going to change the population of that graded vintage. And again, everyone will kind of say vintage is a long play. You're not going to flip it in a week for double the money. It's kind of something that is going to gradually go up. That would be kind of my take on it. It is definitely fun, but especially if you're struggling with cash flow, I wouldn't dump it all into vintage. Vintage is if you want a long-term asset.
You got any vintage cards, Jace?
I just have a set from 1937 of Churchman cigarette cards that I found on a local marketplace. Like, one of the things I always give advice to people is, if you're in, especially if you're in Europe, probably your local like listing site, like it could be like Gumtree or it could be Dundee or whatever it is, or whatever your like Craigslist style website is, you can generally find people who have stuff in the attic, who have stuff in drawers, who aren't into soccer cards, aren't into football cards, who might just be selling lots of stuff, and you can go and buy those. So I just picked one of those up from a guy for like 20 quid. And I think they're still worth about 20 quid, but they're fun and they're from 1937. So it's pretty cool. In terms of vintage, I don't really collect it. We have talked, Enzo and I have talked in the past about, maybe it's because I'm Irish and I'm just like, I don't really care about like Stanley Matthews. I don't really care about like any of the old like Brazilian fellas. Like, it doesn't really matter to me. Like, I'm not looking at anybody saying I want him. But also at the same time, I think my personal skepticism towards vintage is, I understand that soccer is growing and the soccer hobby is growing, but like, if someone gets into soccer, the first thing they're going to do isn't to be like, well, I better go and do my homework and see who was playing for Argentina in the 50s. Like, that's just not part of it. Like, I've never had a conversation like that with a football fan, so I don't really know why it would be different for football collectors. But maybe I'm just being too cynical or something.
Yeah. Oh, so what you're saying there is, are you potentially predicting there that you don't really see the value of vintage going sky high?
I just don't see who the value. I don't see who the collector base is. People who love
like
old
outside
stickers,
of Maradona. Yeah, outside of like the Maradonas, Pelés, Cruyffs, all that sort of stuff. I think
like when old vintage, you have to be into the card itself. You'd be like, I love old cigarette cards, or I love like the first 50 years of stickers. Like, because you're never going to be like, I love this specific player. Not enough people are going to be into that, unless it's Pelé or Maradona.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, were you going to say something?
No. Go on.
I'm just thinking like even currently in soccer, like compared to other sports, so many different leagues, so many different like players that can be world class. And if you go back 50, 60 years, there's the same stuff. Like for the like it's like trying to have huge demand today for Gareth Bale. Gareth Bale is huge player. But if it's a player on his level, but 70, 80, 90 years ago, and you're in around, even the Maradonas, the Pelés, in with that vintage bubble, it's like, how does that one player get picked out? Unless it's an absolute cult hero at a club, or it's a national cult hero, or something happens that will spike the interest. Because even if the supply is really low, if the demand is zero, the price isn't going up. So how do you get that concentrated demand? But the good thing with vintage is that you only need a slight spike in demand to get it to rocket. You need to be careful with that demand.
Yeah, I can imagine. The only things that I can think of, because as you were talking now, I was trying to think of scenarios that might bump the price of, say, I don't know, I've got a book, Dixie Dean, right? There you go. He's an old school kind of footballer that, if you know football, you know who Dixie Dean is. But But the only thing that I think they could say spike the price of Dixie Dean cards would be if there was a film made, right, in the same vein as The Damned United. When that came out, that got a lot of interest. There was a book, there was the film. Obviously, Cloughy was still alive at that point, so I think it was slightly different. But it kind of like generated a lot of nostalgia for Cloughy, and people went back and started to watch. If that happened again, like, it was a really good biopic on Dixie Dean, and Dixie Dean had like quite an interesting life.
Yeah.
And it became a bit of a cult thing. Then you could see, but that, I mean, you're trying to chance that and knowing that in advance.
Yeah, the likelihood of it is very small.
But like in that scenario, Dixie Dean would be a good one to pick up because your collector base is now hardcore Evertonians, you know, and it's hardcore English. Again, he's the top scorer all time, so like that's a good one, you know. But if you're picking up the second highest scorer of all time, it's probably not going to be as good a play. And you might have to, like, again, if you're waiting 60 or 70 years, like in 70 years' time, how many people are going to be like, oh, remember this fella? It is, you know,
when there's no,
but they're fun to have. That's the thing, because they're not that expensive and they are fun. Like they are really, really, like some people have crazy, like El Rey has huge vintage collection and it's just beautiful. And all the information knows, it becomes almost like a history collection, you know, literally.
What were you going to say, Jay?
I was going to say, like, there's a lot of these games, like, there's no footage. Like, there's no, you know, if you're talking really old vintage, like, you're talking about grainy footage that has, like, 20 frames a second, it looks like a cartoon. Who's going to go looking for it? Like, I just don't see a scenario in which somebody, do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't see a scenario in which somebody actually seeks it out. So I don't think they obviously have potential to go up. And all you need is 2, 3, 4 competing collectors at the top range. And all of a sudden that money gets drilled down into the market and deals start to happen. But the idea that vintage is going to go up as a matter of fact, I don't accept. Because if you look at like the MLB, it's the same league. They've been playing in the MLB, that baseball league, or a ancestor of that league in America for whatever, 150 years, maybe, I don't know. So it's just the same league. But like, if you say to somebody, oh yeah, this fella, he played for Sao Paulo, or he played for Corinthians in 1928, and he won the Intercontinental Cup and the Brazilian State League in Sao Paulo, you'd be like, what are you talking? I don't know what the Intercontinental Cup is. Like. You know, like, so I just don't see.
That's like a hipster. That's what a hipster would say to you as well, you know.
Yeah.
But you don't know what
like,
the Intercontinental League. Come on.
I think the risk, with soccer is that the space is just too big. Too many teams, too many different players. And I think then when you go to vintage, which is obscure enough, it's obscure enough, but there's still 10, 15, 20 years ago, there was that many players, that many leagues pretty much. So it's just a hard one, but it's definitely a fun space to collect in. Right.
Jace, what do you say to people when they ask you about the hobby? Like, you know, like, to those who don't like collect, when they start talking to you about this little passion that you've got, how do you explain it to them?
I think I start by saying that there's money in it. There's people buy and sell these cards, because that's once you mention that, even if you're not in it for the money, even if you are just a collector, if you suggest to somebody that the reason you're doing it or part of the motivation you're doing it is because these things have long-term value, people kind of sit forward and they're, oh, right, okay. Like the idea that you would just have a collection because you love it and you're interested in football and you like memorabilia. Like, why do I have a Baby Yoda thing up there? It's because I watched The Mandalorian, I liked it. But if somebody was like, oh, you don't really need to have that, that's a bit nerdy or whatever. But then if I said that thing goes for €500, everyone would be like, whoa, okay, I like that. So, like, because everyone's just like obsessed with money. So I usually put the money aspect out first, and then once they lean in on the money, I go like, and they're like, and what kind of cards are these? And I go, oh, this or this, and I start by showing them some cool designs, some autographs. So it goes money, then aesthetics, and then the sport itself. Okay.
Is that a similar strategy that you deploy in these situations?
I would say I'm doing a thing with football cards and stickers, and I let them raise the eyebrow and kind of go, huh? And then I'm like, you know, like the stickers, and then they're looking at me crazy, and I said, oh, there's money in it. I bring in the money second.
You bring in the money reaction.
They're like, oh, normally, like if I'm in work at my desk, I'd like, because sometimes I have some of my cards in work, I'm messing around with them, and then I'd kind of just pull up like the PWCC auctions and just scroll through what they're at, and then the people are they're obviously the highest end of cards going up for sale, and people are seeing the figures, and they're kind of like, hold on a second, what's that? And then they get really intrigued, because they're like, who would spend that much on a card? And then I try to explain why someone would spend that much on a card. But I feel like, the money does always get kind of mentioned, but I don't lead with it. I definitely lead with the football card stickers, see what they say. Right. I always mention the likes of Match Attacks or just the World Cup stickers as kind of the two things that like anyone, even if you're not trying to interact with the hobby, you've probably seen Match Attacks somewhere because they're highly produced. And then I kind of bring them in like that. Then I talk about the money, and then I try to if they stick around, if they don't zone out and go about their business, I'll kind of get deeper into it and explain more.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And you often find that once people have given themselves the justification, then they like it. So like they don't allow themselves to really fully engage with it until you tell them that there might be some monetary value. And then they go like, oh, like I support Middlesbrough. Like, is there Middlesbrough cards? And you're like, well, maybe when and then they're Googling Middlesbrough cards. They're like, I wouldn't mind a Sambalonga sticker. And it's like 2 minutes ago, you were telling me I was crazy. So
Joe's just desired job. Do you remember him?
I have people in work buying cards and stickers. Like, there's people in work buying cards and stickers that are into F1, buying F1 stickers, and just like bet into it already. Like, because it is something that everyone kind of knows inherently and does, just collecting things and everyone loves sports. Like, not everyone, but if you love sports, and it is something that does go hand in hand, and it is fairly easy to pick up once you're kind of in it for the fun as well.
Yeah, I have a similar kind of thing, lads, but from from a job perspective now, where I haven't met anybody new for like 6 months because of lockdown anyway. But when I introduce, my wife's family, if they're asking what I'm doing or whatever, I have a similar kind of thing where I'm like, yeah, it's sports cards. And straight away, it's like, what on earth? Like trading cards. How are you earning a living from that? And then when you start to unpack it with them, and now my father-in-law subscribes to our mailing list, so he's always like,
that's where those Mbappes went. I knew it.
Exactly. And my father-in-law's just got loads of Mbappes. He's so now he's seen it and he's like following what we're doing and stuff, and he's like, wow, this is really cool, So it is interesting. And it's funny because, as I've said multiple times on the show, and as I said on your show, I came into this. I'm not a card collector. Historically, collected stickers back in the day, and and what have you, but never really been a card collector. But I've started to get enthusiastic about it because I'm exposed to it all the time. It's like it's like a virus.
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah. No, I was going to say it's more like a virus in the sense that you can't be around it and not catch it. Like once you're exposed to it. And I've been going back and like looking at old stickers from like the mid 90s, like Everton ones.
Yeah.
And I was telling someone the other day, I did a podcast with a guy called Aaron who runs a site called Investing in Soccer, I think. And I was telling him about Sabutio. You boys will probably know. Sabutio did some cards in the 90s, but they came as like a board game, I think. If I remember rightly, and I had some of them back in the day, and that old, the Dogs of War Everton period, and I was looking at them again the other day, and I was saying, I'm not. If I buy them, they're not worth anything. I'm just gonna have to look at them again, and it's hard just to not get the, get the bug.
Yeah, like I think as well, like for myself, when I came in first, we had this. It was just when like stickers were really taking off, and people were realizing that a lot of rookies were in stickers, and then like. We're kind of very hardcore. Like, if someone has a card 2 years after they had a sticker, you have to invest in the sticker. The sticker's going to have value. And now, after I've been in it for, whatever number of months, and I've had time to develop my own taste, in most cases, if I'm collecting a personal collection for a player, I don't actually want the sticker because I just prefer the card as a collector. So I know the sticker might have more value on the open market, but I want the card. So that's an example of me moving from just pure, like, there's money to be made, this is going to hold value, to like, well, actually, I don't want. And so now I'm in a different section of the collector base. So like you do get into it and then you get more into it and everyone has to find their own niche. We're always advising people like, you're not going to like everything. You're not actually supposed to like everything. If you find that every time somebody releases something, you go, oh, I want that. Like, that's not really the right thing to be doing. You're supposed to develop your own sense of what you actually like. That's how otherwise you'll never be happy.
No. I've just got a notification off Zoom saying this is going to end in 10 minutes. So that's a bit of a worry. I wasn't expecting that. Is that because we're doing a 3-way thing?
Yes.
Is that what it is?
It is, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't aware of that. I'll have to make sure that. So we've got 10 minutes to cram the rest of the podcast in, gents.
Okay.
And but just so I think this is a good question to ask, Enzo, and I'll start with you on this one. Is those people who are new to this, how are you currently like navigating this boom that we're going through at the moment? Like what types of things are you buying? What types of things are you looking for?
Yeah. I've definitely, like, after the last few months, I built up such a collection of kind of, like, I built up a collection that basically ended up with a lot of value, and I started to sell a lot of the kind of, players that I look at and really assess and say, do I believe in it long term or not, even if they still have hype in the hobby now. I'm trying to sell off the ones I don't really believe in, and I have put a lot of money together, working away as well. And basically right now I'm trying to catch one of the big. So I'm not definitely, like, I don't know. I'm it's part of a smaller percentage, I guess, but I'm trying to catch like one of the really, really big cards before they are out of reach, So I have about a 10 grand budget, and I'm trying to put it into either one card or two cards, which is obviously not everyone listening here is probably not in the same boat, but that is something that I'm trying to do, because I do think if I can successfully execute on a card no more than 10 grand, I think in 12 months time we could be looking at 100 grand plus, if it's the right player, Messi rookie, Ronaldo rookie, that kind of stuff. A lot of them have already kind of went away, but I'm also, and I guess an important thing is I'm also looking at lower grades of those iconic cards. So I bought a Barcelona Campio, number 62, Messi rookie in PSA 8 last December. So late December for €600. There's one, I checked it 2 days ago on PWCC auction now, the exact same one, Catalan version, same as mine, PSA 8, same as mine. It's at $1.5 grand now at auction with 7 days left in 12 months. So, like, that's because the 10 has gone to the moon, the 9 is going with it, everything else rises with it. If this supply is low enough, it's worth, accepting you can't get the 9, you can't get the 10, just get an 8, because if the 10 goes up, everything follows.
Jace, what's your theory on this in terms of the spike in prices, and where do you think that actually goes, mate? How does this play out?
Yeah, I think at the top end of the market, like Enzo said, a very interesting thing, which you find a lot of people say, and it's a phrase I'm always encouraging people not to use, because people say, you're Messi, you're Ronaldo, that kind of thing. And my number one piece of advice is, people in the hobby, there is no that kind of thing. Like, the list is Pele, Maradona, Messi, Ronaldo, and as far as we know, that's it. There's no reason to think that, obviously somebody will get to their level at some point. It could be in the next 5 years with Mbappe. It could be in the next 50 years, someone we never heard of. But like, when it comes to investing in serious prices, the only people I would say are absolutely going up, short-term, medium-term, long-term, are Pele, Maradona, and Messi and Ronaldo. And I think like Messi's going to have $1 million cards. I mean, there's a Messi soon, like maybe 12 months, maybe 18 months, maybe 6 months.
Wow.
So I see the top end of the market really shooting up. And I think the lower ends of the market are going to keep evolving. And we're going to hit a peak in terms of demand in soccer, I would say. We kind of all think the 2026 World Cup. So we're not slowing down until then, I don't think. But one thing that's going to be interesting is, what we need to do is, as a hobby in soccer, is to figure out what is a player's rookie. How do we decide that? Who decides that? And what sets do we value? And I think over the next 4 or 5 years, we're not going to see huge increases in prices across the board, because we haven't done the donkey work yet of figuring out what's what. So we haven't actually agreed on a market to operate within, except on Messi and Ronaldo, Pele, Maradona, where we're all just pretty sure spend whatever you can because it's only going up.
Yeah. Look, lads, we've got 5 minutes left. I did have lots more questions, so we'll have to come back and do this again. But I like to wrap up with this question, and if you can give me like a minute and a half each. Enzo, I'll start with you. If you were on my side of the fence at Futera, like, what kind of things would you be doing in our position now?
I'm going to give you a bit of advice that probably you can't run with, and if you could pull it off, I think it would be one of the biggest things that gets pulled off this year. If I was in Futera's position, I would look at the licensings I have, and then I would hit up anybody and everybody at SoRare. You're familiar with SoRare? They have the digital licenses. You're not okay. NFTs?
Nope.
That means non-fungible tokens. It basically means digital collectibles that are built on the blockchain.
Okay, right.
And we're not salesmen for it. Enzo's just giving a theory.
Okay. I would take all the licenses. They have the official digital licenses for each of these clubs that you get, the trading card licenses for.
Yeah.
I would link up with them, I would hit them up, link up with them. They're very new and they're going. Where they're going is going to be crazy. And I would basically try to set up. Imagine like a Futera box with Marseille, Liverpool, etc. players in it, but within it you could hit a redemption token that you scrape off, put it into So Rare, and then you have a 1 of 10 version of that card in So Rare. So for example, a 1 of 1.
It'd be a purely digital card, though. So you think there's a bit of scope
It's
here?
a digital asset. So just for context, a 1 of 1 Joao Felix recently went for I think 18,000 at auction. I think Gary V was the one who bought it. We all know him. Yeah. Definitely I'd look into it, and I would look into any card company if I was part of any of them, is trying to build a relationship and connection through So Rare to mix the two together. Instead of seeing them as like a digital trading card that is a threat, I would look at it as an opportunity to mix both people on each platform. It's very transferable. There's also, they do like weekly fantasy leagues. There's ways to use it, but at its core, they're digital assets.
Right, okay.
There's a unique. I would definitely, that would be me.
I'll chase that up. Jason, we've got 3.5 minutes left, mate. Have you got anything?
Sorry, Jason.
Have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just say that from a Soccer Cards United point of view, when Enzo says Football Index, he means Football Index or similar companies. And when he says So Rare, he means So Rare or similar companies. We don't work for any of these people.
Sorry.
So, yeah, that's all right. So I would just say that if I were you, I think the Unique Live launch has been very good. I picked up a couple of things. It's a very exciting product. I would say keep adding clubs because people like it. And I would also say that whatever company in soccer figures out a way to do their sales so that things don't sell out in seconds, whoever figures out a way to prolong their sales is going to get a lot of heat and a lot of positive heat and a lot of hype. Because people are frustrated at things selling out in 5 minutes, things selling out in 5 seconds, with across the board. So I think whoever figures, if I were you, I would figure out a way to do ballots, lottos, doesn't matter. They don't even have to really work, but just to be seen to be trying to solve that problem.
We've got something that we're working on at the moment that will hopefully try and alleviate that. I've been very privy to that over the last couple of days. The feedback that we've had. I don't think there's any suspect activity going on the site. I think we don't do very big runs of our cards. When you're doing Mbappe one, it's going to sell out incredibly quickly. I can't speak tonight, but yeah, no, it's something that we'll definitely address. So lads, I've got 2 minutes left on this now, so we'll cut it off here because I don't want anything to happen and this to disappear into the universe. So I really appreciate you both coming on. We'll definitely do this again. It's the Soccer Cards United podcast for anybody listening to this. Go over there and check it out if you haven't already, but I suspect most of you have. So, all right, boys, thank you for coming on then, and I'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Adam.
All right, cheers, boys.